So this is going to be the very last video of the year, the last day of notes that you have to take. And it's only 6 slides, so I'm just going to do it all in one video. Now you will need a calculator for these notes. And again, we want to do the same little test on your calculator that we did on the last notes. So if you plug in the sine of 30 into your calculator, you should get 0.5. If you're not getting that 0.5, just bring your calculator to me and I'll put it in the right mode for you. Okay? So, on the last notes, we were solving for x. We were finding the length of a side. Now today, we're going to use trig to find the measure of an angle. So here I have a triangle and I know 2 sides are 17 and 20. If I wanted to find the third side, I could use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for that third side. However, this time we're going to be solving for theta. And remember, theta represents an angle. So I'm going to know how many degrees that angle is. We are going to set these up the same way you set them up solving for x. So if this is my angle, this would be the adjacent side, and this is the hypotenuse, and this would be the opposite side. Now I don't have anything over there at the opposite side, so I don't need that. So a and h means I'm going to be using cosine. And we are still going to set up our equation the same way we have been. So cosine and then our angle, but we don't know our angle. So I'm going to put theta there. And then that equals a over h. So it's set up the exact same way that we did our last problems. Only now there's no x over here to solve for. Instead, I have to get that theta all by itself. Now, I can't divide both sides by cosine. That's not something that we can do because cosine is not a number. It's a function. So to get rid of a function, you have to do its inverse. For example, if something is added to both sides of an equation, we subtract because subtracting is the inverse. Or if something's multiplied, we divide because dividing is the inverse. Well, for trig functions, the inverse looks like the same thing, only to the -1. And if you look on your calculator, above the button in blue will be cosine to the -1 and sine to the -1 and tangent to the -1. That's the inverse. So we're going to do that to both sides of the equation, just like you would add to both sides or subtract from both sides. That's what we want to do. So I'm going to take the inverse cosine of both sides. Now, on the left side, those cancel, and I'm left with just theta. And then on the right side, that is exactly what you're going to plug into your calculator. So you want to type in, hit the second button, and then cosine, and you'll see on your screen cosine to the -1 will show up. Then you just type in 17 divided by 20, close your parentheses, and hit enter. And when you do that, you should get, and we're going to round our angles to whole numbers, so you should get 32 degrees. It's about 31.78, but we're just going to round to a whole number to 32 degrees. Okay? If you can't get that on your calculator or you can't figure it out, just call me over and I'll show you how to do it. So for the next one, again, we are going to solve for an angle. We want to solve for theta. So, looking at my angle, first I'm going to label my sides. So I have the opposite, the hypotenuse, and the adjacent. Now in this one, this example, I don't have the adjacent. I just have O and H. So that's going to be sine. So we set it up. Your trig function, and then your angle, and then your fraction. Now again, you have to solve for theta. So to get rid of it, I'm going to take the inverse of both sides. That's going to get rid of my sine. Uh-oh, my pen stopped working. There we go. Okay, so I'm left with theta on the left, and then sine to the -1, 12 over 13, the inverse sine. Plug that right into your calculator, and you should get 67 degrees. Again, for angles, we're always going to round to the whole number. So, always start with your angle, and label your three sides. So, starting here, my three sides. This is opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. In this case, I don't have the hypotenuse, so O and A is tangent. So I'll have the tangent of my angle equals opposite over adjacent. I'll take the inverse of both sides, because that's the only way to get rid of the tangent. Plug that right into your calculator, and you're going to get 59 degrees. Now, there is a chance that you're going to get an error on your calculator. If ever you're doing this and you get an error, that just means that you set up your problem incorrectly. Okay, because sometimes depending on how these fractions work, you could get something that's undefined. So just make sure that if you do get that error message, go back and check your work, because something is wrong that you've set up. Okay, so here's my angle. Label your three sides: opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. I don't have a hypotenuse, so we're going to use tangent, O and A, trig function, and then your angle, and that equals your fraction. Then we're going to take the inverse of both sides. So between the last notes, where you were solving for x, and these notes, where you're solving for theta, the setup for all of those problems is exactly the same. So you're always starting with your angle, labeling your sides as OA and H, figuring out what trig function you need to use, and then after you set all that up, then you're going to solve it differently. If you're solving for theta, we'll use the inverse. If you're solving for x, whether it's in the numerator or denominator, you'll solve that different ways. But the setup of the problem is always the same. So I was kind of talking through that, but you would solve this problem the same way as we solved the first three. Now, the two on the back look a little bit different. And that's just because now we're given all three sides. So, here's my angle. This time it's phi, not theta, but you don't change anything. So this is opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. I have all three. So I'm not going to scratch any of them out. I have them all. So now the good news is you can pick whatever you want. If you choose sine, then the sine of theta is 24 over 26. If you choose the cosine, then the cosine is 10 over 26. And if you use tangent, then the tangent is 24 over 10. Now, if you were to solve all three of these and plug all three of these into your calculator, and I'll just show you what that would be fairly quickly. So the inverse of sine of 24 over 26, or the inverse cosine of 10 over 26, or the inverse tangent of 24 over 10. No matter which one you pick, theta is always going to be 67. Okay, so if you are given all three sides, you can pick whatever you want, whatever you choose to be. And I just realized I don't have SOHCAHTOA up here for you. It will be on your test. So again, if you want to use sine, you would just use opposite and hypotenuse. If you want to use cosine, it would be adjacent and hypotenuse. If you want to use tangent, it would be opposite and adjacent. You can pick whatever you want. So there's another example here of where you're given all three sides. So I'll show you how to set up with using sine, cosine, or tangent. So again, let me write SOHCAHTOA here because I forgot. So if I'm looking at my angle, this would be opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. So if you want to use the sine, that would be opposite over hypotenuse. If you want to use the cosine, that would be adjacent over hypotenuse. And if you want to use the tangent, that would be opposite over adjacent. And after you solve whichever one you want to solve, it doesn't matter, your answer should be 37 degrees. Now on the test, obviously you won't have to use all three, sine, cosine, or tangent. Pick whichever one you want. Okay? If you're having any trouble with this, let me know. I can help you with any of it, but that's our last set of notes. So that'll be the last new thing that we learn this year.